Hey, everybody. Welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We have Jonathan Capehart back with us today. We'll chat with Jonathan in just a little bit. But first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe. And you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So let's get into the big thing this week. I want to talk about this deadly shooting in Minneapolis because there are so many things wrong with this situation. The first thing in this video that we see is that the woman who was murdered, in my opinion, Renee Good, she's sort of like parked a little sideways on this residential street in the middle of the street. Not blocking the street because she's seen waving on cars, including other ICE agent cars. But then all of a sudden, this pickup truck ICE agent vehicle comes speeding up, stops. I think 2, maybe 3 agents get out. But the one agent in particular who was driving comes rushing towards her car. And the only thing he says, he screams, "Get the fuck out of the car." That's it. And as he's saying that, he's got his left hand like on the door and the right hand on the handle. And he's trying to open the door and pulling her out. Now, you tell me, if you're in a car, if you're a woman in a car, and an unidentified masked man who might be an agent, but who the hell knows who he is, comes rushing up to your car screaming, "Get the fuck out of the car." Whatever happened to, "Excuse me, ma'am, I'm agent so-and-so. May I please ask you to show us your hands and then kindly get yourself out of the car?" Like, whatever happened to that? Who has the right to just scream, "Get the fuck out of the car," and expect a young woman not to be terrified? So, likely terrified, she puts her car in reverse. She backs up a couple of feet, turns her wheel to the right, and she's clearly seen on this video attempting to drive away without hurting anyone. Now, another agent who was standing kind of towards the left front of her car puts himself in front of the vehicle, which is a violation of law enforcement protocol. You're not supposed to put yourself in front of a vehicle. Puts himself in front. But we see in this video, as she begins to move forward after putting it in reverse, like the car is almost not even moving yet, he's already drawn his revolver. As she starts to pass him, he fires a shot into her windshield because he's now sort of positioned in front of her. And then as she passes him, as the car begins to move to its eventual resting spot after it crashed into a tree and a car, he fires off 2 more shots. So we see in this video that he's shooting well after the point where his life could be in danger, if that's what he claims happened. He's at least 2 or 3 feet away from the car. So that begs the question, why was he firing? What made him think his life was in danger at that particular moment? She was shot in the face and the head at point blank range. And when the car smashed into the other car and the tree, did we see any agents rush over to her car? Nope, not a one. We saw a woman screaming, "What the fuck did you do? What the fuck did you do? Oh my God, oh my God." She runs over to the car. Then a physician walked over and we hear him say, "Can I take a pulse?" And they told him to stay away. And when he identified himself as a doctor, an agent barked, "I don't care." Almost immediately after this happened, Donald Trump, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, J.D. Vance, they all issued statements or addresses. Essentially, they exonerated the agent and victim blamed Renee Good.
It was an act of domestic terrorism. What happened was our ICE officers were out in an enforcement action. They got stuck in the snow because of the adverse weather that is in Minneapolis. They were attempting to push out their vehicle, and a woman attacked them and those surrounding them and attempted to run them over and ram them with her vehicle. An officer of ours acted quickly and defensively shot to protect himself and the people around him. And my understanding is that she was hit and is deceased.
Now, a good exercise for any of you to do is to listen to that clip as you watch the video. And what you will see is that there is nothing in that video that matches what she said. So this is just more gaslighting, which is what they're very good at. We've come to know the Trump administration as one that gaslights and engages in cover-up when they're guilty. And that's what they're doing here. How on earth is there ever going to be an investigation that is impartial, that is fair, honest, objective, after the United States president, the vice president, who gave this outrageously combative, nasty, insensitive little speech yesterday, saying that because of the supremacy clause, the agent has absolute immunity? So you have Trump and Vance, and then you have what Kristi Noem just said. They basically said, he's innocent, she's guilty. So how are we supposed to have a impartial, fair investigation? An investigation, by the way, which yesterday the FBI said, we're going to be in charge of it, and we're the only ones involved. And they essentially froze out the state of Minnesota. So Minnesota's not going to be taking part in this investigation. Now, you tell me if Kash Patel, FBI director, is going to conduct a fair, impartial investigation. No fucking way. Minnesota has to be involved. This has to be an independent investigation. One other thing that Vance did, which is probably going to come back to haunt him and the government's case here, is that he referred to this June episode where the agent was involved in a near-death situation where he was, I think, pursuing an undocumented immigrant. The immigrant was in the car and hit the agent and dragged him 300 feet. And the agent ended up needing 33 stitches. And he said, have we no concern or sensitivity for this agent? Implying that the agent was traumatized, which means he shouldn't have been on the street. He should have been on leave. He should have been receiving psychological care, whatever. Because if his traumatic experience of 6 months ago played into his decision-making on Wednesday, and he overreacted, that's a critical piece of information. Now, like a lot of people, after this happened, and after listening to what the administration was putting out, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey was incensed.
They are already trying to spin this as an action of self-defense. Having seen the video of myself, I want to tell everybody directly, that is bullshit. This was an agent recklessly using power that resulted in somebody dying, getting killed. To ICE, get the fuck out of Minneapolis. We do not want you here. Your stated reason for being in this city is to create some kind of safety, and you are doing exactly the opposite.
Now, it's important to note that Renee Good was not a target of Wednesday's ICE raid. There are statements from state officials, Minnesota state officials, that she was there as a legal observer. She wasn't an activist. Apparently, she wasn't protesting. So this whole self-defense thing, why was his life in danger? There were no other agents in front of him as the car moved during the second and third shots. So who was he trying to protect in that moment? The other thing, too, which is really interesting, if you watch that video, focus on when he shoots and how he shoots and how close the other two agents were and how easily one or both of them could have been hit with a stray bullet or a ricocheted bullet. The whole thing is just so fucking reckless. according to all experts that I've seen, he violated all tactical policy of law enforcement by putting himself in front of the vehicle the way he did. It wasn't that he was in front. It was that he put himself there. Now, Donald Trump has been warned for months by governors, by mayors, that putting National Guard troops on American streets, by conducting these violent ICE raids, that shit's going to go wrong. Something's going to happen. Someone's going to get hurt. Someone's going to die. And that could be U.S. citizens. That could be immigrants. That could be ICE agents, Border Patrol agents. And now this is where we are. The truth is, ICE is running wild. It is out of fucking control. Last night in Portland, the story is still unfolding, but agents shot a married couple who were involved in a protest. And we're really waiting to get more information on that. In an effort to significantly boost recruitment, ICE has lowered its hiring standards. Those who are hired are receiving approximately 50% less training. And it's just hard, when you watch a video like that and you watch all the other shit that's been happening. Are we living in Nazi Germany? Because it sure as fuck seems like we have Gestapo agents on American streets terrorizing and killing our citizens now. And, the comparisons to Nazi Germany, I make them as a Jew, and I don't make them lightly. But people need to understand that Hitler first came on the scene in like the late 20s, and the war ended in 1945. So he was around for a long time, and the concentration camps didn't happen day one. And there's a lot of parallels to what's happening now, to the early days of Adolf Hitler's reign of terror in Germany. People need to pay attention. So people ask, is this an inflection point? Is this going to stop the craziness, the rhetoric, the violent tactics of ICE? Probably not. Trump's going to double down, triple down, just keep doing what he's doing. And now we're going to have another cover-up and more gaslighting and more don't believe your lying eyes.
Well, I think that this is something they've been wanting to have happen. They want outrage because they want to employ the Insurrection Act or something along those lines. Mm-hmm. It seems pretty clear. I don't know that they specifically planned on this incident. Of course not. But they planned on enraging people that would go out and protest. And we see that happening all over the country, in New York last night and other states all over the country. And I think that this is Stephen Miller's wet dream.
I think you're right about everything you just said. And that's why you have, like, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and others literally begging people not to take the bait, not to give them what they want, because this is all part of the plan.
I couldn't agree more. You laid out a fairly comprehensive analysis of what happened. But clearly states' rights don't matter. It only matters with things like abortion. I mean, this is just so hypocritical. As long as the federal government can put its boot on everybody's neck, including the states, that they will.
It's all part of this narrative of Donald Trump just acting like he's a fucking king.
I thought that was the most interesting part of the New York Times interview that they had with him. The window into his moral compass.
Yeah, he said, my power is only limited by my morality.
Correct.
Now, the good thing is, that's just him yammering. Because the truth is, as we saw in Congress this week, as we see in the courts of law this week, as we see in his polling, like, there's a lot of opposition forces that do provide some guardrails, have handed him lots of embarrassment and humiliation and actual loss. So there's a limit to what he can actually do.
Well, it's funny, when I heard the morality quote, I was actually listening to it on the radio, and I thought he said mortality.
Talk about wet dreams, dude.
Like, oh, yeah, that would be a limit on his.
Mr. Freud just says, "Well done, Maddie."
But I thought, in reality, that's really what his limit is, and
he has no morality. So there's
but there is. That's why the only thing limiting him is biology.
And J.D. Vance, I mean, he must have said that woman 20 times. and with such venom. That woman. You mean that mother who had plushies stuffed in her glove compartment, who has 3 kids, a little 6-year-old whose father died 2 years ago, and now his mother was murdered on the street? I mean, the soullessness, the complete moral, empathy, bankrupt nature of everything these people say and do. It is stunning.
Well, to that point, the digital editor of the National Catholic Reporter wrote a great critique of Vance where he took him down for calling himself a Catholic because A, lying is a sin, B, murder is a sin, and basically he called out Vance, as 2 popes have done. What kind of Catholic is he?
Well, he's like the rest of them. Bunch of Christian frauds.
Yeah.
It's really shocking that we've come to a place in this country right now where Americans have to be afraid exercising their First Amendment rights of assembly, of free speech, when people are murdered on the streets of America by federal agents, unmasked, unidentified federal agents who are jacked up on their own power, their own anger. It is something that needs to stop. I don't know how we get there, but we were stunned by what happened Wednesday, and what happens Thursday night, 2 people shot in Portland by federal agents. And here we are. It's the normal America thing now. Agents are going to shoot Americans on the streets. Okay, are you kids ready for optimistic Andy?
Yeah.
Waiting with bated breath.
The public and official pressure on the administration will result in them reversing course and bringing Minnesota into this investigation. They can't do this alone because there'll be absolutely no credibility on the outcome of that investigation. It will further erode the public's respect and trust for government and the current rule of law. I just think it's one of those things they're going to have to change.
Well, they don't tend to back down, but it is kind of impossible to do a homicide investigation when the medical examiner is from Minnesota and has the body and the forensic evidence of where the person was shot.
Well, it just depends on whether that evidence has already been given.
Federal
Government can demand whatever they want, but just imagine 6 months from now, a year from now, the announcement is made that the agent was innocent, blah, blah, blah. And that comes from Kash Patel. I just don't think that's where this is headed. I think this is too big to fail. And I don't think Donald Trump gives a flying fuck about sacrificing an agent.
He does, not specifically about an individual, but he cares about the message it sends, that he backed down, that he's weak.
There already has been talk before this happened of Kristi Noem getting fired this month. It could very well give him the fuel he needs to get rid of her, throw her under the bus, blame her, blame him, and then he walks away unscathed.
That is very optimistic.
I would say.
They don't call me optimistic Andy for nothing, Jen. All right. Let's get to our winners and losers.
My winner, the House of Representatives, for passing legislation to reject steep cuts by Trump and fund parts of the government in a bipartisan breakthrough before the January 30th spending deadline. My loser, a tie. ICE for killing U.S. citizen Renee Nicole Good and the FBI for denying Minnesota officials from evidence and therefore blocking the investigation of the shooting.
My loser is Elon Musk this week because China's BYD has overtaken Tesla as the world's top-selling company in electric vehicles, and Tesla is suffering because of it, and I don't think it will recover. My winners are the anti-science paleo influencers who just got a massive boost from RFK Jr.'s evidence-free inverted food pyramid.
My winner, several congressional Republicans who bucked leadership and Trump. 5 senators who voted with Democrats to advance a war powers resolution to restrict Trump's power on military actions in Venezuela. And 17 House members who voted to extend Obamacare subsidies, although that is certain to fail in the Senate. My losers, Trump, Vance, and Noem, for their irresponsible, reckless, and corrupt rush to judgment immediately after the deadly shooting of Renee Good. Which gets us to the weekly rant. So we have this horrific shooting Wednesday in Minnesota by ICE agents of that woman. They killed 37-year-old Renee Nicole Good. I call it murder. I believe she was murdered in cold blood at point-blank range. I'm not sure she and her family will ever get the accountability and justice they deserve, but we can honor her by understanding who she was as a human being, because she is so much more than just a murder victim in this sensational tragedy. She is more than that woman, as J.D. Vance called her, with disdain. Renee was the wife of Becca and the mother of 3 children, a 15-year-old stepson and 12-year-old stepdaughter, and a 6-year-old son who is now orphaned because his father, her second husband, Air Force veteran Tim Macklin, died in 2023. Renee was a creative soul. She was an award-winning poet, an avid writer, and a guitarist who liked to make messy art with her kids. She loved to sing and watch movies. She was born in Colorado, but moved to Minnesota last year and lived in the Twin Cities with Becca. After spending most of her life in Colorado, she briefly moved to Kansas to live with her parents for a time after Tim died. She was a devoted Christian who took part in youth mission trips to Northern Ireland when she was younger. She participated in a chorus in high school before studying vocal performance in college. She attended Old Dominion University in Virginia, graduating in 2020 with an English degree. That same year, she won an Academy of American Poets Award. During her time at Old Dominion, Renee took advanced courses on creative writing and the craft of fiction. Her poetry has been published in Metrosphere and Coronado Literary Review. She previously had co-hosted a podcast with Tim, who was a comedian, and she worked as a dental assistant and at a credit union. She was currently a stay-at-home mom who reportedly was studying online for a graduate degree. In 2024, she and her partner formed a company, Be Good Handiwork, which, according to the filing documents, would perform interior and exterior repair, maintenance, and upgrade projects in residential homes. On Wednesday, Renee had just dropped off her 6-year-old son at school when she encountered the ICE agents. She died on her older sister's birthday, and just a few blocks from where she lived. There is a GoFundMe page set up to help Renee's wife and 6-year-old son deal with this devastating loss. It initially sought $50,000. As of this morning, it's raised $1.4 million. Money won't bring Renee back, but it demonstrates the goodness and generosity of people, of strangers, and it will, in so many ways, help them more comfortably navigate through this tragedy over the months and years to come. All right, let's get to Jonathan Capehart. He is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and co-host of the morning edition of The Weekend on MS Now. From 2020 to 2025, he was anchor of The Saturday Show and The Sunday Show on MSNBC. He is also an analyst on the PBS News Hour. He is a former associate editor at The Washington Post, where he was an opinion writer for nearly 2 decades. He was also deputy editorial page editor of the New York Daily News and served on its editorial board. His editorial campaign in 1999 to save the Apollo Theater earned the board the Pulitzer Prize for Editorial Writing. His new memoir, Yet Here I Am, Lessons from a Black Man's Search for Home, is a New York Times bestseller. Jonathan, welcome back into the back room.
Hey, Andy, thank you very much. Happy New Year.
Likewise. And what a year it's starting out to be. I mean, honestly, Jonathan, it's just 1 week into 2026, and it's already worse than last year. And last year really sucked. And it feels like it's the middle of the year already, and it's only a week.
Yeah. But hey, you know, you live with the life you've got. And this is the one. One we have.
The old Donald Rumsfeld theory on life. You live the life that you have, not the one you want.
Right.
So let's talk about, and I'll say it, the horrific point-blank murder yesterday by ICE of 37-year-old Renee Good, mother of a 6-year-old who's now an orphan, This took place on a residential street in Minneapolis. Give me your thoughts on what happened yesterday.
I mean, just horrific. And primarily because you have the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, down there at the border. In normal times, when the secretary says something, you take it to the bank that it's based in fact, that whatever they're saying is, measured and all the responsible things. That's not what we got yesterday. We got a statement from the secretary within, I don't know, an hour or two of the incident. So no investigation of any sort of length of time or merit had been done. And what she told the American people in that statement was demonstrably false compared to the video that everyone had been watching for a little while. And so now I think what we have here is a situation where you have an administration that has a policy that they're hell bent on following. Facts and situations be damned, and they're just going to plow right ahead while arguing to people to don't believe your lying eyes, don't believe what you've seen. And I think that the reaction from Governor Walz, and especially the reaction from Mayor Frey, Minneapolis Mayor Frey, speaks to the frustration not just of two big D Democrat elected officials. We're looking at two elected officials who are grappling with what happens when the federal government sends in federal law enforcement officials into their state, their community, where they didn't ask for them, where they don't want them, and where those masked and unidentifiable federal law enforcement officials are not even coordinating with state and local officials.
Yeah, you're talking about the rush to judgment that both Donald Trump and Kristi Noem did, but you speak to the larger issue. You mentioned, are you going to believe me or your lying eyes? That's their mission statement. And
right.
The question has to be asked when DHS, DOJ, FBI are just loyal servants of Donald Trump. How are we ever going to get a fair, honest, objective investigation to the point where there may ultimately be someone that's held accountable? How is that going to happen?
Well, that is the dilemma that we are in as a nation. However, what we're talking about in terms of the president and the secretary, we're talking about two political actors who are overseeing a federal government that long pre-existed them. And I think in the law enforcement agencies, FBI, even DHS, even though it's relatively young since it came out of the ashes of 9/11, formed after 9/11, you have career professionals within these agencies who I would like to believe still put their professionalism and their training ahead of whatever the political agenda is of the people who happen to be running the agency or the nation at any one time. And I think one of the situations we're also seeing here is that the people who they have recruited into ICE by, lowering their standards, lowering or streamlining the training, they're putting untrained, unprofessional people, and I recognize I'm generalizing here, but we've got a lot of evidence that the folks who are hitting the streets on behalf of for ICE, on behalf of this administration, are people who are not trained to do what they're doing, and certainly aren't trained to do what they're doing in urban environments. The president and the secretary talk about this as a war, but they're not in a theater of war. Mm-hmm. And so you have a situation, as we saw happen in Minneapolis yesterday. The other factor here that I think that the administration isn't taking as seriously as they should And that is, ever since they started sending ICE into communities, people have not been willing to just let them do what they're doing. We have tons of iPhone and phone videos of what's been happening on the streets of America since ICE agents were deployed by Trump. And I think that this is as a result of what happened 5 years ago in Minneapolis with the murder of George Floyd. If that young woman had not recorded all 9.5 minutes of the murder of George Floyd, it would have been the cops say this and the bystanders say that with no fair arbiter. And what we have here 5 years later in Minneapolis is a bystander who videoed the whole thing. And was it because they did that and put it up on social media, we were all able to take the video and match it to the words that were being said by Secretary Noem. And the fact that she said that the agent's car got stuck in the snow because of inclement weather on the streets there in Minnesota, and that this person, a quote unquote, falsely, domestic terrorist, tried to ram them with her car. That's what she said. And I'm sure the folks who are listening and watching us now have seen the video many, many times. The video does not match the words coming out of the secretary's mouth. And so that's why I think that as long as the American people do their part to ensure that what's happening in their communities and happening on the streets of their communities is documented in some way, that the administration won't be able to lie to the American people at will. They can try, but the video, as we are seeing in my peripheral vision, because I've got MS on the TV on the wall, they're showing it again.
I totally can appreciate and I share the hope that you have that the career law enforcement people are going to do the right thing and that ultimately the administration will do the right thing. But we have video of J6. We just passed the 5-year anniversary, and look how they're trying to rewrite that history. And to a certain degree have been successful with a good chunk of this population. You know, I've had Michael Cohen on this podcast many times, and he always talks about how when he worked at Trump.org, Donald Trump never would say to somebody, this is what I want. What he would do is he would talk in vagaries, and you'd be like, that's what he wants. So when I saw his post the other day where he said, you know, this was self-defense, blah, blah, blah. He's messaging to his secretaries, to his department heads, to his agencies that I want another cover-up. That's what I took. And I think when the big guy says there's nothing to see here, I really worry that, you know, the orders are coming from above and will be trickled through the system. And so my hope is that Minnesota, the state of Minnesota, Keith Ellison, the Attorney General, and the local law enforcement agencies do their own independent investigation. And maybe that's where the accountability is going to be. I don't know.
Well, no. That's exactly what's going to happen. In a situation like this, you know, if things were normal, if we had a normal administration with a normal FBI, and this had happened, there would be the FBI investigation, but then there would also be, the state would look into it as well. So, look, I understand the skepticism, but I also have to believe that, sure, president says like a mob boss, talks in the way that a mob boss talks, and his top lieutenants operate under those rules. And also because they're just operating for an audience of one. Meanwhile, the rest of us, the rest of the American people are doing everything they can to ensure that whatever they're saying is, and especially if it's a lie, there is evidence to prove the lie. And while in the short term, I take your point, in the short term, especially with January 6th, yeah, President Trump and his people have done a very good job at rewriting history. But here's the thing about history. it's long. And
I
there
agree.
is no way January 6th is going to, in the writing of history 20 years from now, there's nothing Trump can do to rewrite that history in the eyes of history. You just can't.
Yeah. Well, look, you said something before which I think is incredibly critical, and that is the resistance movement has been alive and well for several months now and is gaining momentum. And that is where I hang my hat on the most, that we, the people, have consistently this past year, demonstrated our resilience, our determination, our frustration, our anger, and our unwillingness to accept this bullshit. I think if Trump becomes too unpopular and loses part of his MAGA base, then that's going to unleash a rebellion among congressional Republicans, because if they don't fear the base the same way anymore, and they come up against these filing deadlines where they're like, hey, I'm not being primaried, all of a sudden they might be a little bit more emboldened. So I think this year is going to be really interesting in terms of how the people are going to force the politics.
Yeah, I'm watching that, but I've been watching Republicans in the age of Trump now for 10 years. And we have seen people who know better and who have known better not do better, buckle under the pressure from the White House. And part of that, I think, has to do with sort of the mob boss atmosphere around this administration, where the threats that come in to them personally, to their district offices, and not just to them, to their families. And so, this culture of fear that a lot of Americans are feeling in their communities when they've got masked, unidentifiable federal agents, whether they're ICE or Border Patrol, we don't know. That fear is also being felt among congressional Republicans. And I think that's why you don't hear much from, well, we're starting to hear a little bit more, just a little bit more. But that's why you have not seen or heard much resistance from them. But I'm with you. I think that it is beginning to crack. You had Senator Tillis on the floor yesterday, yelling about all this talk about Greenland and what it would do to the alliance. You've got Senator Kennedy saying it would be weapons grade stupidity for them to do something like that. Marjorie Taylor Greene is gone. Lauren Boebert is doing things vis-a-vis Epstein. And I think you hit the nail on the head when it comes to filing deadlines, because once those filing deadlines pass and they see that they might not have a primary challenge, maybe that is what is needed for some of these folks to stiffen their spines and stiffen their resolve to, I don't know, stand up for the prerogatives of an Article 1 branch of government.
Yeah, especially as they see polling that might indicate that there's a blue tidal wave coming in a few months. I don't know. I'm with you. I've been watching for 10 years, and it's just vomitous to watch the complete abdication of a co-equal branch of government. What I try to do is ask why. I'm like, why is that? And the only answer I've ever come up with is that it's because they are terrified of the base. Not of Donald Trump per se, but of the base. If they start to feel less scared of the base, something will change. I don't know to what degree. I don't know when that's going to come. But I think this midterm election that we have coming up is going to motivate at least some of these people. Do you think we are really at some kind of meaningful inflection point? And in particular with this murder in Minnesota, do you think on any level this results in some kind of dialing back of these ICE raids? Or do you think, just like we've seen over the last 10 years, he doubles down, triples down, and just digs in further?
Yeah, the latter. I think we, as the American people, should stop looking for inflection points.
We've crossed way too many Rubicons, haven't we? Right.
When it comes to anything, I mean, when Newtown happened, people thought, this is it. This is an inflection point. We are going to get gun safety legislation because you cannot slaughter children in their classrooms the way that happened at Newtown and not do something about it. And yet, pretty much nothing was done about it. I think maybe there was some sort of background check thing that went through. So it wasn't an inflection point, the murder of children in their grade schoolers, preschool, elementary school kids in their classrooms, then, there's nothing to be done when it comes to gun safety. And I think when it comes to this administration, they do not care. The president does not care what particularly you or I have to say about what they're doing.
Yeah.
I think that the president is going to double and triple and quadruple down on this policy, I think, because he got reelected. He got elected a second time despite being a convicted felon. He feels vindicated. He feels omnipotent. And plenty of things have happened to reinforce that notion from a pliant Congress and a Speaker of the House who isn't someone who is being bulldozed by the president. He is a true believer. Mm-hmm. So he's treating Congress as the staffing arm of the executive branch. He's got a court, not the lower courts for the most part, but the Supreme Court, which has done things that have made him more powerful. I should say made the president as an institution more powerful, but in the hands of this guy, and I'm thinking of the immunity for official acts. So all these things he's doing right now as president, if someone tries to hold him accountable and take him to court, can argue immunity.
Yeah. I so agree with you about the inflection points, but the truth is he is a lame duck president. He is a wounded animal. I mean, this past year wasn't a great year for him. I mean, he's broken a lot of shit, but it really hasn't been a successful year for him. He's lost a lot of things in Congress. He's lost in the court of law, lost in the court of public opinion. This Epstein thing hangs over his head. MAGA is split, but there will be an inflection point at some point. It is going to happen, especially as, we have elections coming up, whether it's 26 or 28. The question is, when will that be? And I want to make sure I'm around for it and I don't miss it. So I want to enjoy it. So that's why, like every week, I'm like, is this it? Is this the inflection point? But I do think it's going to come at some point.
Right. It will come. But the thing about inflection points is, you don't see they don't materialize until sometime later, when you're able to then go back and look and see, oh, this is when it started. This is when the dam started to break. I mean, to my point, it could be that the elections last November were the start of the inflection point, because here was an administration that thought, because it came in on a tidal wave of support, particularly from the Latino community. Again, his feeling of omnipotence because of the immunity ruling from the Supreme Court. So he does all of this stuff, all written out in Project 2025, gets little to no resistance from the legislative branch, gets green lights half the time at most from the judicial branch. He's, had major support from his own base, which is all he cares about. Forget about public opinion polls. If one comes out, look at his Republican support, because that's the number he's looking at. So you put all that together and you go into the November elections last November, and what happened? Abigail Spanberger, blows away Winsome Searles to become governor of Virginia. Mikey Sherrill blows away her opponent to become governor of New Jersey in a race that I was afraid she was going to lose because of how Trump narrowly lost it in the 24 election. And then Zohran Mamdani, and let's not make too much out of a municipal race, but the Republicans were trying to do a lot of things to turn him into this big boogeyman of the left, and he won convincingly with what, more than 1 million votes, which hadn't been done since Lindsay. So that to me says more. It says a lot about Democrats and their messaging and being focused on affordability, but it also says that the American people were angry. And the only way you can exercise your anger really against the powerful is at the ballot box. And so you're electing mayors and governors who are Democrats, but then you go down ballot in various places around the country with those 2 power authority seats in Georgia that went to Democrats, or a college classmate of mine who lives in a tiny town in Connecticut sent me a message saying, my little town just elected its first mayor for the first time in 70 years. That's why I think maybe when we've had enough time, maybe it was those November elections that marked the start of the inflection point.
I think you're 100% right. And that's been evidenced by the fact that the short-lived love affair that independents had with him, that Hispanics had with him, that young men had with him, that's over. And one has to wonder, like, seeing a 37-year-old woman be assassinated on a residential street, a U.S. citizen, someone who wasn't a target of this particular raid, just seeing her shot in the head, in the face, and then the way they treated her. And then you also look at the start of that video. This agent pulls up in this pickup truck and storms over to her. And the first and only thing he says to her is, get the fuck out of the car, and then grabs her handle. Like, are we living in Nazi Germany? Is this the Gestapo where we have to fear that masked, unidentified agents charge at us, screaming at us, don't identify themselves, and then proceed to try to pull us out of our own vehicles? When this starts to settle in, I think there's going to be another part of his constituency that says, I've had enough. I don't know how many there will be, but we don't need all of MAGA to abandon him. If we just get 3 to 5% to say, I've had enough, that moves the needle.
Sure. And, we don't need to, make analogies to Nazi Germany to focus people on what is happening in the here and now. And what is happening in the here and now goes against everything that we say we stand for as a nation. And so if Ms. Good was not able to exercise her First Amendment right to do what she was doing, which from what I understand was like saying to people, ICE is here, which has been happening around the country as like a community service. And also you have these again, not well-trained, not qualified people in masks, in unidentified cars, racing around communities around the country. I think the American people are put off by this. I think a lot of people who voted for the president because they wanted him to shut down the border and do something about illegal immigration and maybe even get rid of the worst, right? But what we've seen is that he's going above and beyond that. And in fact, not getting many of the worst and swooping in, a lot of people who were either in this country legally, in this country, and going through the process that we as a nation set out for them to follow, and they're being snatched before they can even get to their appointments. And even American citizens being deported in the administration saying, well, we don't care. Too bad for them. I think all of those things are what's going to fuel a ballot backlash in November. But what that means is Democrats have to come out and vote in ways they probably haven't done before. And 2, Democrats need to make sure that their voter registration is current and that they are still on the voter rolls, because while we're talking about Minneapolis, there are all sorts of things happening in the states to purge voter rolls
yes.
of potential voters. And so I think, sure, if Democratic candidates can peel away, altogether 2%, excuse me, or 3% of MAGA supporting MAGA Trump supporters, that's great. But I think the more crucial thing is to ensure that Democrats come out to vote, but also Americans who might not be affiliated with any party or who might be peripheral Republicans, to point out to them that what's being done in their name by their government is not what they want. And I think that that's why the affordability arguments that were made in the run-up to the elections in November were salient, and why they worked. Because people looked around and like, look, I don't care if it's a Democrat or Republican, who is bringing down the prices? Mm-hmm. Who is looking out for me? And now that argument is even more so on affordability, on rule of law, on just safety. Are you safe in your own community from people who supposedly are working for your government?
Yeah, well, I think that's why his polling is abysmal and he's underwater on his signature issues, in particular on immigration. And just as a point of clarification, the reason, as a Jew, the reason I bring up Nazi Germany and the Gestapo is because the concentration camps, they weren't around at the start of Hitler's ascent. Germany grew into that. Germany was a thriving democracy like the United States, full of brilliant scientists and entertainers and people who never in their wildest imagination could think that their country would descend into such madness and such violence and genocide. And I refuse to think like, oh, this is America, and you know what? As bad as it is, it could never descend into that. Because we see that what the founding fathers did, what they created, wasn't designed to stop someone like Trump. They wrote everything because they thought no matter who would be president, would be operating in good faith. And that's not what we see. So now we cut to January 7th, 2026, and we have U.S. citizens murdered on the streets by federal agents, right? That is terrifying to me. And I think, obviously, we have a long ways to go before we can make real comparisons. But if we don't respect history, history repeats itself in a very bad way. I just want to segue into the other insanity that's been taking place this year, and that is the raid in Venezuela, the arrest and seizure of Nicolas Maduro. Like, what is going on? What is our policy?
I have no idea what the policy is. Look, Andy, one day, I think back in October or late September, I ran into a former British diplomat, a friend of mine, and we were just talking, and he said to me, "Are you paying attention to Venezuela?" And I said, I mean, I know stuff's happening, but I haven't done a deep dive. And he said to me, pay attention to Venezuela because he's going to invade or do something, but he's going to invade. And leave aside all the excuses, things that are being said about drug trafficking, whatever. It is about oil and U.S. access to oil, which in Venezuela is the largest oil reserve in the world. And so if the United States has access to that, then it can, if it gets, pie in the sky, push aside Saudi Arabia. And when he said this to me, it's like, oh my God, all of this, I can see all of this. Mm. This all makes sense. And so here we have what happened over the weekend on Saturday. And I'm not surprised that when you boil it all down, it's oil. Why else would you, if you're going to do regime change, you don't just take out the leader.
Do regime change.
You take out the regime.
Right.
You don't put in his vice president. And so I'm sitting here thinking, okay, is this what is really happening is really sort of like a preschooler's understanding of how the world works?
Yes.
That all you want is the oil, so you're just going to swoop in and snatch the president and his wife, and then just think that you install that president's vice president as the president, then everything's going to be okay.
Well, he told
We have seen
he told Joe Scarborough this week that the reason why Iraq failed where Venezuela will succeed is because Bush didn't take the oil, and I'm going to take the oil. Oh,
that's insane.
that's beyond insane.
Yeah, you tell that to the people. And this is what frightens me the most. We're gonna if this goes the way keeps going, you're gonna have U.S. troops safeguarding oil facilities against a population that does, even though they hated Maduro, they don't want to be occupied. Also, they hated Maduro, but his regime is still there.
Yes.
So what incentive do they have to allow the United States to extract its resources for its benefit? Well, the Trump administration's benefit, potentially, and not put up a fight. I long for the day when we had serious people in these positions. You know, Senator Rubio, or Secretary Rubio, used to be one of those people.
No, he knows better. Look, this gets us back to the inflection point conversation, because this is what I want to ask you. How does he sell this current status quo in Venezuela to MAGA? How does he say, I told you about drugs, but this wasn't about drugs. Regime change, democracy, blah, 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 threats to America. But you know what? I just left everybody there, and I basically lied to you because I just want oil. How does that not at least turn a few percentage points of MAGA against him, on top of Epstein, on top of everything else?
Right. No, you are right. And
does he
that's
sell
something I don't know how he sells it. Unless what he believes is, I can tell them anything and they'll still be with me. Remember what he said in 2015, I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose any support. And he has been proven right every time. But I think something else is at work here, and I've been noodling it around, and maybe one day I'll end up writing a column. But it seems to me that some of the actions Trump has taken, he comes in on MAGA, you know, on the backs of MAGA and this faithful support. And these are people who said no more forever wars. Focus on us, America first, and oh, by the way, release the Epstein files so we can get at this rumored mythological cabal of child pederasts. You know, and what has he done? Thumbed his nose on the Epstein situation, has swooped in and put us in the United States in a position of being in a war in Venezuela, and has done other things where it seems to me that Trump, now basically thinks, well, I don't need them, because I think he is moving more into viewing himself as a monarch. And when you are a monarch, you don't need to care what the legislative branch has to say or what the judicial branch has to say, especially if they rule against you. Destroying the East Wing and building your own gigantic ballroom, doing the things you've done to the Oval Office without a care to what the American people might think, not feeling accountable to anyone but yourself. And so I think that cleaving of himself away from MAGA, cleaving himself away from the American people, in the end could be what makes MAGA crumble. but it's just a matter of how long will that take.
Yeah. And this connects back to our conversation about congressional Republicans, because I think you're raising a really, really important point. And that is, he does act like a king. He doesn't care. He certainly doesn't care about the party or the cost to the party of any of his actions. But do you think that that's part of what will eventually make at least some congressional Republicans grow a pair and say, this guy's killing us, and we've got an election coming up. We're going to lose everything unless. Now, it doesn't mean anything's going to change, because I think it's a little too late.
Right.
But that's the reality. He's operating for Donald Trump, which is what he's always done, for Donald Trump and nobody else.
Right.
What is the impact on congressional Republicans of that as we move through this year closer to the election?
Well, it goes back to what you said at the beginning of our conversation, and it's the filing deadlines. Once they know, because that's been Trump's threat.
Yes.
I'm going to primary you. He did that to Marjorie Taylor Greene. He's done it to other people. If they get past their filing deadline and see that they have no challenger, well, maybe that's what it will take for them to show some courage and really push back. And I think we're starting to see it from members of the Senate. But once we start rolling through the filing deadlines, start watching to see how many profiles and courage come up, because politicians, even though particularly Republicans have been focused on, just a party of one, in the end, is about their own political survival. Mm-hmm. And the die might be cast in a lot of these races, and some of them very well might lose, but you never know until people go out and vote. And so I think particularly some Republicans might, once the coast is clear, figure, okay, now is the time for me to say, well, no, Mr. President, I disagree with you on this. But, we shall see, because we've been waiting for these profiles and courage for a very long time.
Yeah. Well, it's like how any schoolyard bully is dealt with. Once a couple of brave people take them on, then there's a pile on. In our last couple of minutes, I want to end on a more positive, upbeat note. You recently sat down for a lengthy interview with former First Lady Michelle Obama. It's a terrific conversation, and I really suggest everyone watch it. What did you learn about this remarkable woman that you hadn't known before?
Well, what I learned it was part of the last question that I asked her. And I almost didn't ask it because we were already out of time. But I decided, you know what? No, I'm going to ask. And that was when I said to her, I think I have you figured out. Having, read her book, The Look, watched a lot of the interviews she did about the book, having already read Becoming, going and picking up The Light We Carry, and reading through all of these things, I understood, wait a minute. She's very much like her mother, Mrs. Robinson, Marion Robinson, who was just a tell it like it is, unvarnished truth. Oh, hey, the world is round. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. You might not like it, but that's the world. That is the world as it is. And when you listen to her and you read her book, and she's just very matter of fact on issues of race and gender and society and where we are and who we are as a nation and our standing in the world, everything. That is her mother. That is the upbringing that she had from Marion Robinson. At the same time, she has her father's way of not letting the world as it is dim her light, dim her hope for the future. And you see that in the ways, in that particular interview, when I asked her what gives her hope, and she pointed that little girl right there. Mm-hmm. And I turned around and there's this beautiful young Black girl. And she proceeds to talk about how all the stuff that we are doing is for her and her generation, in the same way that when she gets to be our age, everything she does has to be for the generations that come after her. And, given her life, given the life of her parents, of her relatives, which she talks about and writes about, she understands that things aren't perfect. The world as it is not perfect. But you know what? Where we are right now is infinitely better than where we were a generation ago, 2 generations ago. And so being able to, in the preparation for the interview, to come to that realization and to be able to present her like, hey, I'm playing armchair psychiatrist. I've got you figured out. Here it is. And I make the case. And she says, and I asked her, do I have it right? And she said, yes. I was like, oh, wonderful. I mean, as someone who interviews people all the time, you think you've got them figured out. And so you're like, let me test the hypothesis. And it comes back, no, you got it. That's the joy of the job that we have. Sitting in front of someone and trying to bring that person out, or at least have I picked the lock as a way of getting in there and understanding them better, as a way of then having other people understand them better. That's the joy of the job.
Yeah. And let me ask you this question, because I ask it for about 90 million people. Is there a scenario on this planet where she runs for president in 2020?
No.
Not even a microscopic.
No.
Not even a Jim Carrey. So there's a chance.
No, there is no zero.
Man, talk about dimming light and dimming hope.
She's been very clear. Like, no. And she's just to remind people, you guys forget, I didn't want to be in this in the first place. Like, she got into politics because of her husband.
Just think.
I know, but here, for anyone who thinks that Michelle Obama should run for president because she's so popular and everything, which is true.
Well, she'd be a great president.
Which is true. But also remember, Hillary Clinton was very popular when she stepped down as Secretary of State before she ran for president. Her approval ratings were in the 60s. The moment she stepped into the arena, that all fell apart. And so just hold on to the good feelings, hold on to the optimism that you feel about Michelle Obama, and keep it there. But also remember this, she's not shying away. She's out there. She's talking. All people, and she's holding a mirror up to the country and a mirror up to this administration, not as directly as people would like, but she has not abandoned the field. She's right there. All people have to do is just listen to what she's saying.
Yeah, well, that's okay. My new hopeful candidate is Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, because anybody who could tell ICE to get the fuck out of Minneapolis, that guy should be sitting in the White House. Jonathan, this is a great conversation. Hope you come back and continue the chat sometime.
Sure thing. Thanks, Andy.
All righty, take care. This episode was produced and edited by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-produced by Maddie Rosenberg and Jen Hammoud for Radio Free Rhinecliff, with additional editing by Maddie Rosenberg, music by Andrew Hollander, and graphic design by Cricket Langell. And with a special thanks to our sponsor, The Epicurean. Again, thanks for listening. Please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to the Backroom with Andy Ostroy YouTube channel, where you can watch full videos of our interviews. See you next time.